This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining in. This is one of the masterclass at ISDL, and today we have our guest debater come faculty. So we have Sharmila Parmanand joining in from the UK. Dr. Sharmila Parmanand is a fellow in gender and human rights at the London School of Economics. She's also PhD from University of Cambridge, an excellent debater, being in debating for more than a decade, being coach to Palestine country and Philippines, and also being a trainer across 45 countries. And she's been one of the mentor to us while designing the ideal last year. And as we are looking to make ideal more grand this year, going from 3,500 kids this year, and that's why we invited her as first masterclass for this year. We want to make this year fresh with our best mentor, best debater to come. With that, let me introduce Sharmila ma'am to take the floor.
Thank you very much. So hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. So tonight, we will be talking about elements of a good debate. And because we don't have that much time, so I'll be talking for about 30 minutes. I've chosen to focus on 5 key elements so that we can discuss them in depth. Afterwards, I can take some questions from you. So I'll share my screen. And I hope, this should be clear to everyone. Okay, so the first element of a good debate is a clear definition, right? I think you know at this point that a motion refers to the topic to be debated in the round. And usually motions are phrased starting with "this house." That's the most basic way a motion is phrased. Sometimes it can be phrased in other ways, right? And sometimes motions will have information slides or context slides. What are these things? So sometimes there might be a word in the motion that the judges or the organizers would like to define ahead of time for you. So they'll include that in the motion, right? Or they'll include some context. So you have to assume that these things are true. And usually when you encounter a motion, if something is unclear to you, it's important to ask about it right away. So you should ask the members of the CAP or the chief judges for a clarification. And obviously they cannot give you arguments, but they can define the words for you, right? And this definition should happen in the first proposition speech. So here's an example of a clear definition, right? A clear definition is something that everyone understands, and that is a reasonable definition of the motion. So let's say your motion is, this house would allow people to sell their organs for money. It is not reasonable to say we are simply talking about blood donation, right? That is too soft of a definition. It's unreasonable, and it's not even a clearly connected to the motion. At the same time, you're also not expected to say that you will allow people to die and to sell their hearts and brains while they're still alive. That's also unreasonable. So a clear definition in this case would be something like allowing people to receive money for their kidney or a portion of their liver or lungs or bone marrow, all of those things that will not necessarily kill them, but it's also not, there's still a risk involved, right? Okay. So here are some definition now questions that I'll go through with you. Let's say the motion is this house would ban cosmetic surgery. So cosmetic surgery is basically medical procedures that are done for purely aesthetic purposes, right? It's not a medical need. So this would include things like improving or maybe like changing the structure of someone's nose or changing the shape of someone's eyes or changing the size of certain body parts, right? And so you want to ban it. Would it be fair to say that you would only ban it for children? No, right? That's not a clear or fair definition. The definition must apply to even adults. What if the motion is this house supports cosmetic surgery? Is it fair for a proposition to say they only support it for adults? Yeah, probably, right? Because there are many things we don't allow children to do anyway. So that's okay. Now, if your motion is this house would ban zoos, is it fair for the proposition to ban only private zoos? No, right? Because the motion says zoos in general. Now, is it fair for a proposition to propose banning all zoos? while still allowing wildlife sanctuaries or nature reserves? Yes, because those are not zoos, right? So their structure is a bit different. This House believes that gay individuals should be allowed to adopt. Is it legitimate for proposition to set the motion to parts of the world where homosexuality is legal? Yes, because how can they be expected to debate this motion in countries where homosexuality is not allowed, like Saudi Arabia, for example? That's just not reasonable, right? So, okay. So first element is clear, reasonable, fair definition. Second element of a good debate is clear problem identification, right? So when you see a motion, there has to be a point to this debate. Why are we having this conversation? Why was the topic set? What is the context or problem or issue you are addressing? You know, what were the organizers thinking when they set this topic, right? Surely there is something about this topic that makes it important to talk about. So let's say again, the motion is banning cosmetic surgery. So usually, the problem that this is trying to solve is restrictive standards of beauty, or maybe even racist standards of beauty, right? Where certain physical features are seen as better than others. And therefore, cosmetic surgery, people are pressured into undergoing cosmetic surgery to conform to those standards of beauty. And that is coercive, right? That's not necessarily a free choice if everyone else is doing it and you feel like you will lose out in terms of your social status or your professional opportunities if you don't do it as well, right? So that's the problem it's trying to solve. I think on the opposition, you say, we agree that sexism exists in beauty standards and racism exists in beauty standards. But the problem is that individuals have no control over how they look when they are born, right? So you banning cosmetic surgery, you actually make the problem worse because you take that control away from individuals even more, that it just becomes random chance or random luck. At least with cosmetic surgery, they have some opportunity to address these disparities in how they look. Next, lifting patents on green technology. So let's define this first, right? A patent is a protection that is given to a product, usually for a period of 20 years. And you're going to hear a lot about patents in your debate careers in the future. This is one of the most common debates, right? What does it mean if someone holds a patent? If you hold a patent, the assumption is you were the person who discovered this product or this process, right? Or maybe you sold it to someone. But that means you have the right, and only you have the right to make use of this process or to sell this product. And if other people want to, they have to pay you, and you can say no for 20 years, right? So by lifting patents on green technology, we mean the moment someone manufactures technology that is environmentally friendly or that helps us deal with environmental problems, like maybe wind technology or solar energy-based technology, they will not have that protection, right? We're lifting the patents. So that's a definition. What problem are we solving here? So on the proposition side, you say urgency, right? Environmental degradation is happening at such an accelerated pace that we are hitting a point of no return. And because these patents exist, this technology is too expensive. We are not able to sell it. We're not able to mass produce it. And companies are just sitting on it, right? And so we're forced to keep using oil and coal and other dirty technology that's polluting the earth. So we need to lift that patent so we can make this technology more accessible. On the opposition side, you say this is dangerous because if you lift the patent, it becomes now a problem of no one has an incentive to innovate anymore, right? Why would I then invest so much in green technology, in research and development, if I'm not assured of the profits, right? So I put in so much capital for research, and then someone else can just steal the idea, but they didn't spend any capital for that. So I end up losing money. So no one will now want to invest, and we make it worse, right? So Another debate is making voting compulsory. So this means voting is no longer a right, but it is a duty, it's an obligation. Because now you can choose not to vote, even if you have the right to vote, if you're an adult, right? So the problem you might solve here is you might say there are a lot of people who are not voting in elections. And that's a problem in our democracy because it means a government doesn't really represent the totality of the population. And politicians don't campaign, don't care about the needs of those groups of people who don't vote. So voting should actually be an obligation. Everyone should actually vote, right? And if they don't, they should be fined or they should be in prison. And on the other side, you can say, what really is the problem? You have the opportunity to vote. And if you don't, then it means that elections are not important to you. There's no problem, right? Why should you be forced to vote if you don't care? It should be the people who care who will be determining the future of the country. And also, politicians have an incentive already to campaign to you because they want to win your vote. If they have not won your vote, that just means you were not happy with any of them. So why should you be forced to vote, right? So one side is saying there's a problem and another side is saying there's actually no problem here. You are creating a problem, right? And in fact, if you force people to vote and they don't want to and they're angry about that, they will probably vote for dumb candidates or they will destroy their votes, or they'll not think about their votes carefully. Paying students for good academic performance. So the problem here could be students lack an incentive or motivation to do well academically, or maybe their parents don't help them or don't support their studies well enough. So if you create a financial incentive, then parents now have a motivation to support their children's studies, and kids now have a motivation to study harder, which is good for them in the future. On the opposition side, you can say, one, this is dangerous because students will now be bullied by their parents and will now be punished if they don't get good grades, which creates a lot of stress and anxiety. Two, you actually end up helping the students who are already good, right? The students who are already getting good grades in the first place. Who are these students? These students likely come from families where they have a lot of support, where they have access to tutors and all of that, right? Which means you're not actually helping the students that you want to help the most. The ones who might need, remedial classes, the ones who might be busy working and helping their parents, those who might be dealing with other household issues, right? You only make their lives worse because you make their parents angry at them, or the ones with learning difficulties, because they don't succeed. So what really is the problem, right? What's happening? Okay. Next. Third element of a good debate is a clear stance and a model, if necessary. Not all debates require a model, some do, right? Depends how the motion is phrased. A clear stance is important because you need to be able to identify on both sides, proposition and opposition, the boundaries of what you're defending, right? How strong or how moderate is your stance, right? Let's say you want to ban offensive speech. How would you define offensive speech? Would you include speech that insults religion? Would you include speech that insults people on the basis of gender, sex, race, class, country of origin? Where would you draw the line on what offensive is? What if someone finds, any criticism of religion offensive? Are you going to ban that, or does it have to be, at a level above that, right? So you need to be prepared to answer some of these questions. If the motion is banning smoking, on the other side too, like if you don't want to ban offensive speech, are you going to allow even speech that incites violence? Even speech that says we must kill this group of people, right? Are you going to allow that or not? Where are you drawing the line? If you have to defend banning smoking, you also need to ask yourself, are you also going to ban alcohol or not? Are you also going to ban tobacco? So what kind of activities, marijuana? What kind of activities are similar and different, and where do you position yourself? And if you ban smoking, are you going to ban other forms of risk-taking behavior, right? Unhealthy behavior like sugar and fatty food? Or is there something special about smoking? If you are banning the sale of meat, right? You're saying, oh, the world should become vegetarian. And your argument is about animal rights, let's say, or ethical treatment of animals. Are you still going to allow people to keep animals as pets? Are you going to allow animal-based products like leather? So all of these things, right, is something you need to think about. There is a motion that says ban professional modeling for children because the modeling industry is quite unhealthy, right? There's a lot of anxiety about how you look, your physical appearance. People develop eating disorders. People are exposed to drugs and alcohol at a young age. Are you also going to ban professional? Are you also going to ban competitive sports? Are you also going to ban debating and math competitions? Or is there something different about modeling, right? And on the other side, you might want to argue there isn't something different about modeling. It's very similar to all of these other skills that children build. Um, oh, do you want to say anything? Oh, good, good.
Yeah, I've just one question. Correct. Students are allowed to ask the question in the notes that is it so? Okay, who is annotating? Please annotate. So is it like so? One, do we need to have a model basis the motion, or it's just the format of the debate? So, for example, say World School Debating Championship required a model. Is it so, or it depends just on the motion itself?
It depends on the motion, not the format. So whatever format you are doing, some motions will be more obvious and straightforward. Like banning smoking is so clear, right? What else are you going to say? Banning the sale of meat is also quite clear. Now, banning professional modeling for children is clear, but if you're on the opposition side and you allow modeling, you probably need a model because you will probably want to explain how you will regulate it, right? How you will protect against the abuses. So a model is kind of like a policy or a set of steps or a set of mechanisms that you are proposing to make it easier to defend your side. So let's say you were on the opposition and you want to allow professional modeling for children. So you will say something like, we are allowing it because it's not different from everything else. Children learn skills, they're able to earn money and save for their future. But here is our proposal. First, we will make sure that there's a cap on the number of hours that they can work so that it doesn't affect their education, right? Second, we will make sure that the children have chaperones all the time to make sure that they don't get exposed to alcohol or drugs. Third, we will insist that the money that the children make from modeling must go into a trust fund for their own future so that their parents don't take advantage of them. So we also make sure that children are not in sexualized, um, modeling uh, environments, right? So that's a policy or that's a model. What is the prop stance for this house would ban the sale of meat? So there are many ways to approach this debate. One can be the ethical position, which is that animals feel pain and animal suffering is unacceptable. And therefore it is immoral to eat meat. The other position is an ecological argument, which is it is actually more environmentally unsustainable to keep producing meat because we consume more resources, more land, and the fact when other parts of the world eat meat, that contributes to food insecurity in other parts of the world. It is more likely to have a world that has access to food and to prevent starvation or degradation of environmental resources if we eat plants instead, right? So these are some of the ways to argue that. Allow euthanasia. So this particular motion probably requires a bit of a model because it's not immediately clear. How can you tell if you need a model or not? Sometimes by using common sense, by reading the motion, and sometimes it is also through experience, right? You get more familiar with these things. So allowing euthanasia, you probably say something like, when we are dealing with individuals who are in huge amounts of pain, or who are diagnosed with a terminal illness, um, we think they should be allowed to decide to A, end treatment, and B, administer a set of drugs that will hasten their death, right? And why are we doing so? Euthanasia is another term for mercy killing. So there are two types of euthanasia. One is passive, um, you just stop treatment, right? And the other one is active. So you might administer some drugs um, to hasten the death of someone who's already sick anyway, right? And some people will call it, um, you know, humane. Some people will say, look, this is allowing people to die with dignity, because some people, pain is too much, or you lose control over your bodily functions. You're unable to stand, you're unable to speak, you're unable to eat on your own, and you lose your, and for some people this is a lack of dignity, so they should be given control over their life, and that includes control over not prolonging their death, right? So this can be a model, for example. um, there is a question that was sent to me: does preparing a model provide you an edge over others? I mean, if the motion requires a model, then yes. But if the motion doesn't require a model, then the model doesn't really help you. In fact, it becomes a waste of time to go through a model if you don't need it, because then you can spend that time on arguments instead. Finally, making vaccines mandatory, right? So this probably also requires a model, right? You probably want to sit. So who will be given euthanasia? Question on the chat. So I think it might be good to suggest that these are individuals who are in a lot of pain, who are very, very ill, and who have been diagnosed with a terminal illness. So a terminal illness means an illness that has no cure, right? And they have a fixed amount of time left alive before their condition deteriorates, right? When proposing a model, should we talk about the research done on effectiveness of our proposal? Yes. If you have access to this information, then you should definitely bring it out in the round. Okay. The next topic is making vaccines mandatory, which again will probably require a model, right? So here, I think you can say, look, we will require people to provide evidence that they have been vaccinated before they can access health services or education services, or before they can be hired for jobs or continue in their present jobs, or before they can travel, right? Those people who are unvaccinated are going to have to pay for themselves in case they get sick and they are denied entry into these places. So someone's going to ask, what about migrants without documentation? So you can probably say something like, we will make sure that vaccines are accessible to everyone. So before we make vaccines mandatory, we will first give everyone an option to get vaccinated. Because obviously it's unfair to make it mandatory if some people didn't have the chance to access the vaccines, right? And on the opposition side, if you don't want to make vaccines mandatory, I'm largely talking about COVID here. But yeah, this motion is phrased as general. Usually it says COVID vaccines. So the question here is, can the op argue that it should be advised for everyone to take it, but there are shortages? So that's what proposition should prevent, right? Proposition should say, we will only make it mandatory after everyone has had a right to access vaccines. So in countries that have rolled out vaccines and that have invited the entire population, eligible population, to access vaccines, it is fair for them to make it mandatory because people had their chance to take it, but they haven't, in which case it is the fault of the individual now. So opposition side, I think, is going to say, no, we shouldn't make it mandatory because people have a right to opt out of these things. They have a right to their bodies. But what we can do maybe is require them to show a negative COVID test, or maybe we should incentivize them to take vaccines. We offer more incentives rather than punishment, because punishment does not work, and these people will be shut out of society. So what are you going to do if they're not vaccinated but they need help? You're not going to help them. Then that's going to make it worse. And that's actually going to make COVID spread, right? I think you do both. So Adisha asked, should we focus more on what can be done when speaking or on how our proposition works in the current scenario? I think you do both. Like if it's something that is already happening in the world, then you can show that it is working. If it's something that hasn't happened yet in the world, then you'll have to make some predictions, right? Okay, cool. I will now move on to the third element, which is a clear clash. A clear clash is essential for a good debate, right? What is basically a clash? It is the point at which both teams disagree, right? What are teams disagreeing on? What are the areas of disagreement? Let's say the motion is about a death penalty. So the teams are disagreeing on their definitions of justice. How do you understand justice? Someone says eye for an eye. You took away someone's life, your life should be taken away. And someone says, that's not what justice is, that's revenge. Justice means you are punished, but we shouldn't reproduce the same kind of violence that you committed because that makes us no different from the killers, right? We also torture the family of the killer, which is not something we want to, these are innocent people that we are making suffer also. So different conceptions of justice, right? Different understandings of justice. Another place you might disagree for death penalties, one team might say, well, the death penalty actually deters crime because criminals will now be afraid to commit crime. And you can say, we disagree because criminals are not afraid of punishment. They are afraid of getting caught. So the people who commit crimes, who know that they won't get caught, will continue to commit those crimes. If you want to stop crime, you improve the catching part, not the punishing part, right? So again, making voting compulsory, right? Like requiring voting. So let's say proposition says we want to educate our voters and then we want to make sure that everyone votes, otherwise we punish them. Opposition can say, look, we support education. We support encouraging people to vote. We both can do that, but we don't support forcing them. Because if after you have educated them, they still don't want to, that's their right. They want to protest the election, let them, right? So that's where you disagree. Someone asked, what is the opposition stance for euthanasia? So some people will argue that, someone who is sick may feel like they are a burden to their families and they are a burden to society. So they may be operating under unfair pressure or duress. Like they may not actually want to die, but because they are guilty or they are made to feel guilty, then they will just choose to die. And we shouldn't encourage that, right? We shouldn't give up on people. And also, like, we don't really fully know what happens when people are sick. Like, we can't immediately assume that they will die in a fixed number of time. Like, for a lot of these diseases, we don't have enough data, right? So those are some of the things you can say, in terms of abolishing single-sex schools, so proposition side may say, we think all schools should be co-educational. There shouldn't be boys' schools or girls' schools. And we think this is because kids at an early age need to know how to interact with each other and need to know how to interact with the opposite sex. And then the other side can say, oh no, but there are some benefits to single-sex schools, which is that historically, if male and female students are put in the same place, sometimes female students might feel less able to assert themselves. And here you are able to teach them to build resilience and build leadership skills independently, so that when they go out into the world, they already have these skills, right? As opposed to forcing them to mix at a young age when there is a risk that male students may end up dominating, for example, leadership positions or extracurricular activities or social interactions, is supposedly the argument. Making vaccines mandatory, so we've already talked about the clash for this, right? Like, on the one hand, you have a duty to everyone around you to vaccinate so that you are less likely to have strong symptoms of a disease, because the moment that happens, you are taking up healthcare resources from other people, right? You are making it more difficult for other people to get care. Also, it is for your own good because it reduces the intensity of symptoms. The other side is going to say, oh no, but you have a right to your body. And also, some people don't trust the medical establishment because they have bad experiences with doctors and scientists in the past, when people experimented on their populations or or injected them with diseases. So it's fair for them now to not trust pharmaceutical companies, and it's unfair to force people. Okay, should the clash also be around the very essence of elections, being compromised or not? For voting, yes. Sometimes you can say that if you force people to vote, you make if you force people to vote, you make it seem like the election was legitimate because it seems like everyone believes in the election, everyone participated in it. But what if they actually don't believe in the candidates? Or what if they don't actually believe that the election is fair? So not voting is a way to protest that, right? To show that I don't trust what's going on. So that could be a part of the clash. What is the prop for single-sex schools? So abolishing it? Or I just want to check, did you want to know the argument for abolishing single-sex schools or keeping them? Right. So abolishing them would be, in the real world, men and women have to interact with each other. So you need to learn how to do that at a young age, right? You need to learn to interact with people of the opposite sex, to cooperate and to compete with people of the opposite sex at an early age. I'm sorry, can I just check, what is NOTA?
Nota is an option in India that you don't want to, so you still going for voting, but there is a option out there which means all above candidates are not, qualified enough that I really interested into voting, but you not make anyone, eligible enough or interested enough for me to really pick one person. So I'm saying no one is good,
Right. I think you can say still that the fact that you participate in the election still means that you trust that the elections are free and fair. You just don't like any of the candidates. But sometimes not voting sends a message that I don't trust even the process. I think the process itself might be rigged. For example, in countries that are not fully democratic, this might be one way of signaling that, right? Okay. So that is the third element of a good debate. Did anyone have a question?
Yeah, like one student have a question. Just one question. So, for example, you mentioned about that we need to have models, correct? So one is our core arguments, and then we have models in the debates or the format that required. Now, if I'm at position, should I, if I find, easy to say dispute your model, so should I go against your model because I find it just easy as compared to maybe your, fundamental argument?
Both. Yes, oppositions oppose models too. So the arguments you are going to make are going to be based on the model that the proposition side proposed, right? And so if it's part of their model, then yes, absolutely, you should blow it up. I mean, you should attack the arguments too, but you can have model-specific attacks. Okay. Fourth part of a good debate is logical and relevant arguments, right? In a nutshell, an argument is a reason why you support or oppose the motion. It's the heart of your case, right? It usually has three parts. Your label, which sometimes I call your claim, right? Which should be clear and easy to follow. So maybe one sentence that captures the essence of the argument that judges should be able to remember. Second, the analysis and evidence part. So this is where you explain the logical links. What is your premise? What are your assumptions here? What pieces of data are you using to prove the argument? Evidence can be statistics, numbers, examples, hypothetical scenarios sometimes, right? And obviously you have to explain them. So you don't just drop the numbers. Like, what do these numbers mean? Why are they important? Why do they prove your point? And the impact of this argument. Why is this such an important argument, right? So don't forget, it's not enough to show that your argument is true. You also have to show that it's important in the debate, right? Something might be true, but it's probably not relevant in the debate, right? Like, you might have argued that it is important to protect children, but both sides probably want to protect children. So there's no point to that argument, right? So the more important argument is, how does your policy protect children? So again, why is it true? Why is it important? Those are the two questions you are answering when you are making an argument. And the structure of an argument is a claim, label, analysis, evidence, and the impact of this argument, right? And this is true for both sides, right? Finally, rebuttal and engagement are important parts of a good debate as well. There are three goals for rebuttal. And again, everyone should be doing rebuttal except the first speaker of the debate. The first goal, and the strongest rebuttal, is when you are able to prove that the other side's argument is false. The second goal of rebuttal, if you cannot do the first one, is to mitigate. What does mitigate mean? Reduce the damage, right? You cannot completely erase the damage, but you can reduce it. So to show that it's not that bad, it's not that true, it's not that important, right? And finally, if you are struggling to do the first or the second, to do an even if and say, okay, you know what, even if that's true, it's not as important as what I am telling you. And you should choose what I am telling you, right? So let's give you an example of how to do that in the death penalty debate. Let's say you are opposition, and your proposition side is saying, we support the death penalty because the death penalty deters crime. What does it mean to deter crime? It makes people afraid. It sends a message that the government is serious about this top issue, and that you will lose your life if you commit this high-level heinous crime, right? If you kill someone or rape someone, you will be killed too. It communicates that this crime is, or that we have no tolerance for it, and it makes you afraid because you see other people losing their lives when they do this. The first way to respond to that is say, that's not true. In places that have implemented the death penalty, crime rates remain the same. It is similar to the rates in other places that don't have the death penalty, which means the death penalty is not actually deterring crime. That's direct rebuttal. That's false. That's not true. Another way of doing it, and you can combine these three ways, right? You can do 1, 2, 3. You don't need to have just one rebuttal. Another way of doing it will be to say, it might be true, but deterrence only happens in a small number of cases. It only happens in a number of cases where the criminals are expecting that they will be caught. And they are trying to make a calculation. Or maybe I can afford 10 years in jail, but I don't want to die. So maybe if it was just 10 years in jail, I'll do it. But if now I know I could get the death penalty, I won't do it anymore. But there's a very small number of people who will be affected by that, because most people make the decision to commit a crime on the basis of whether they will be caught. And the people who are not afraid of getting caught because they have connections, because they're rich, whatever, it doesn't matter what the punishment is, because they still don't think they will be caught. So the death penalty doesn't really have an effect on them, right? So you have not completely, eliminated the argument, but you have damaged it. You have shown it, you have minimized it, right? Finally, the even if argument, which is, even if this is true, so you concede, maybe, the death penalty actually really does deter people, it's still not okay because other values are more important. Many things can deter people, but it doesn't mean these are moral things, and this doesn't mean this is something we should do. Like, you could hang people for stealing a loaf of bread, but we shouldn't do that because that's immoral. That's not proportionate, right? You could torture the family members of criminals and terrorists to get them to stop, but you don't do that, right? Would you rape a rapist? Of course not. And so basically, this is you saying, okay, it's true that deterrence is achieved, but deterrence is not the basis on which we should be judging this debate. There are other more important values, right? So that is also another way of rebutting. And obviously, if your argument is rebutted, you need to respond to it, right? Teams should respond to rebuttal. And so when someone rebuts you, respond to their rebuttal, they respond to your response. And your arguments need to keep getting stronger, right? You need to defend your arguments. So you don't just come back there and say the same version. You have to respond to the attacks of the other side. And that's what makes a debate a good debate. Okay, I will end here and maybe take about 10 minutes of questions.
Sure. And please raise your hand. I will pick now. You need not to write in the chat, and you can ask the question verbally. Before that, I have two questions. So one, I guess this is one of the common, rebuttal that I've seen. So for example, if I propose a model, the proposition propose a model, let's say on smoking or anything, and then the, opponent point out that, the third rebuttal that you mentioned out of 1, 2, 3, that there is a country X where even they propose this model, try to implement it, but really didn't work over there. So the idea that this model will not work, and we have an example. Now, and that's quite easy to do, because, you will always find there are some countries which would have experimented anything, correct? You look at anything in real world, somewhere somewhat would happen. Now, how to really sort of defend that? Now, how I defend a rebuttal against this point?
I think you say debates are won on the greater majority of cases. Debates are not won based on one or two examples, because obviously this is not a scientific experiment. We don't have to prove 100% accuracy, right? So I think you say in the greater likelihood of cases, these bans have worked or have significantly decreased smoking. So maybe you had 50% of your population smoking, and you put a ban, and now it is just 10% left who are smoking illegally. That's still a win, because on balance, you are still resulting in a healthier population. Maybe it didn't work in this one country, but it worked in most of these countries, so you're still winning. So the best thing to do in that situation is to compare.
Okay, thank you. So Sneha, you can ask your question.
Yeah, first it's without the A, and second, there's these two ideas, principles that I've always seen fighting: utilitarianism and the right to choice of an individual. So in a debate, I've seen that these two ideas don't exactly correlate with each other, and though these two sides try to represent them, that individual benefit or individual right to choice gets undermined in regards to social benefit. These they do not exactly clash, and the teams end up replying to each other's rebuttals, but still there's this major segment which remains unreplied. And at the end of the day, the ad always says that the debate was not that interactive, that there were only straightforward arguments being told, and that there weren't exactly interactions between the two sides. So how do you deal with that as a debater? How do you go ahead and try to make sure that though you reply to rebuttals, you feel that you're replying to rebuttals, but still it's not enough?
So it's a bit difficult to answer this in the abstract, because this might play out very differently depending on the debate you're in, right? But just on an abstract level, what I probably would try to do is to win the debate on their terms as well as your terms. So let's say you're arguing on an individual choice level and they're arguing on a utilitarian level. I would try to find a way to show that even if we use the utilitarian metric in the debate, you're still winning. And I guess a good example would be vaccines, right? And you can say, let's say they're saying we should make it mandatory for a utilitarian argument, greater good of everyone. And you're saying, no, individual choice matters. There is actually a utilitarian counter argument against making vaccines mandatory, because you can say, you know what, if you force people, how do they react? When you force people, they become paranoid, they get angrier, and they resist even more. So actually, if you mandate it, more people will choose not to have it, because that you give fuel to conspiracy theories, right? People will think that big pharma wants to make money from you. People will think that the state is hiding something. People will think that you're violating their religious freedom. And you actually increase the resistance against vaccines, and you increase the population of people who are unvaccinated, who do not have access to social services. So what I would do in that situation is I would try to win the debate both on their grounds and on your grounds, which is usually possible. Because to be honest, if we're dealing with utilitarianism, almost everything can be shown to have utilitarian effects.
Okay, thank you. Aditi, you can go and ask a question. It will be great if you put your camera on. Aditi Saxena.
Yes, sir. Sir, can you hear me? Ma'am, actually, this is my first time that I'll be doing a debate on a formal platform. I've been doing it in my schools and all, but I didn't understand the exact meaning of utilitarian. Could you just explain it? What does it mean in the form of in the debate world? Ma'am, I think you're on mute.
The most simple way of describing utilitarianism and the way that it's usually used in debates is basically what results in the happiness of the greatest number of people in a society or group, right? What results in making more people happy, or sometimes what results in the welfare or the safety or the health of a greater number of people.
Okay, let's go with Arshia.
Well, I didn't understand how the debate rules. Like, could it be like a model MUN, or does it add another set of procedures?
Arshia, your voice is breaking.
So I have to apologize. I have no idea what model MUN is. I mean, I know it exists, but I can't really speak to MUN.
Sure. Then let's go to Aditya.
Yeah. Hey, so Sharmila, my question to you is, so if you're given like, say, two polarizing ideas such as, say, communism and capitalism, and you know the truth lies somewhere in the middle, and you believe that, and your opponent also believes that, but you're still trying to win the debate. But would you then adopt an approach of, say, compromise, or would you still go ahead with the strategy of trying to rule out the arguments of your opponent? Yeah, so I just want your opinion on that, as to how to approach a polarizing issue.
Yeah, a lot of the answers to most debates is actually it depends, or sometimes one side is correct and sometimes the other side is correct. Sadly, you are in a debate, right? And that's why the second element of a good debate is a clear clash. What would I do in that situation? It is okay to concede some things, right? Because it's not worth fighting every single battle and trying to win every single benefit, because you're not going to be able to do that, and that's a waste of your time, and that's not strategic. So what I would do in your situation is try to identify 1, 2, or 3 key things that you must try to prove is more true on your side. And then you can concede, oh, everything else is a wash. Everything else is symmetric. That's a term the kids use these days. So you can be like, yeah, this applies to them. It applies to us. Same, same, same. Here is where it's different. And this is why we are winning here. You have to force the dichotomy, even if you're not convinced that it's real. And you can even say, it's a greater likelihood of cases thing, not an absolute thing, because then otherwise there's no clash, right?
Okay, we have Ahalya.
So how do we approach the motion this House would make financial literacy a requirement to access welfare from both prop and op?
So I think on prop, you need a model here. I think you need to say, because if you just make it a requirement without a model, then you sound really heartless, right? And anti-poor. So I think you have to say, we will provide free financial literacy classes and courses to anyone who's willing to sign up for it, right? And we will make sure that these classes are available online. They're available at convenient hours that we'd run multiple sessions, right? And what will these courses cover? Basics of savings, basics of like managing a budget, being able to not spend on vices or items that you can't afford, how to understand interest rates, like very basic ideas like key terms and definitions, how to open a bank account. And we think it should be a prerequisite for accessing welfare because we want to have a return on investment in welfare. Like we want to make sure that welfare goes to good outcomes like education, health, nutrition, improving the situation of individuals and their families, and financial literacy is necessary for that to happen. Otherwise, the money gets wasted, right? On the opposition side, you can say this is a very elitist policy. Financial literacy is usually just an excuse for taking more money away from people and getting them to spend it on financial services, like put it in banks, for example, or investing it in small businesses where someone else makes money off it because they have to pay interest and things like that. The bottom line here is you should be providing people welfare without this barrier. And also, who is going to determine whether someone passes the test of financial literacy or not? This is going to be an opportunity to just cut some people off from the welfare system, right? And that will usually be lower caste individuals or women or people that we suspect of not being responsible with their money. So financial literacy is also a very elite concept because to you and me, it might seem like it is a waste of money to spend it on cigarettes, but that's because you and I can afford fancy vacations and good dinners. But if you have very little money, we shouldn't be judging people for spending it on sweet food or, smoking and alcohol, because those are the very few opportunities they have for recreation. So even the idea of financial literacy is a very elitist construct, and it's just going to be used to exclude people from access to welfare. It's probably what you say here on OP.
Then we have Vinny.
Yes. My question was that
I guess.
if suppose more students.
Let's wait for a couple of seconds. So
this meeting is being recorded.
As I've answered almost all questions and I don't see any more question. There's one question from Arshia. Arshia, go ahead.
Actually, I read that there would be some preferences to the school team than individuals. So what's that all about?
No, so there's no preference. The idea is that of a school, so there are a lot of partner schools, correct? If you are coming from a particular school and a lot of students from particular school apply, we want to give a representation to school. So ideal in general, we will try to do it that you, if coming from say, let's suppose X school, that you will not compete in the round one with the other fellow schoolmates. You will compete with others, schoolmates from different schools. That's like how we design. Obviously, it's like as a criteria, exception can happen, but the idea is that you should compete with students from another schools within your city or state. Okay, I see no question. If any question, do raise hand. And otherwise, thank you for joining in. And you will receive all the details. Join in for the Saturday masterclass. Otherwise, we keep doing a lot of lives on Instagram. If you're not aware, maybe I just share you the Instagram handle of Ogly. And we invite, debaters, lawyers, best speakers from among the world to do lives with us. So thank you everyone for joining in, and looking forward for your performance in ISDL.